Welcome to the Spark Mergers and Acquisitions in the Bluegrass, or M&A in the Bluegrass event. We want to go ahead and get started, so if you would find your seats. So thank you for taking time to come today. We're excited about this program and excited about tremendous information that's going to be provided over two panels. So just to give you a quick rundown of the events today, we have two panels this morning. We have the first panel is a group of entrepreneurs that have experienced mergers and acquisitions or that are close to the M&A process as a part of their work responsibility. So they'll be able to share a lot of information either from having gone through the process or from being on the other side of the process. So that's going to be our first panel, and then we'll take a break for lunch. So we do have lunch. If you didn't know that, we'll have a pretty nice lunch for you. And then at the end of the session, so after lunch, we'll come back and there's a second panel with Dr. Todd and Davis Marksberry. And so for those that don't know, they are Entrepreneur Hall of Fame members in the state of Kentucky and very experienced entrepreneurs. Both of them have multiple startups along with mergers and acquisitions to their credit. So we should be able to learn a lot from their experiences. So interested in doing that. So at this time, we'd like to welcome our panel to the stage. So gentlemen, come on up. All right, so our speakers today on our panel are Paul Engel, who founded VeBridge, which was sold last year to Konica Minolta, Eldon Griggs, who is Vice President of Mergers and Acquisitions with Galls, which is headquartered in Lexington, and Mike Tetterton, who is CEO and founder of Key Investment Solutions, and also founder and CEO of Creative Lodging Solutions, which was sold in 2017 to FLEETCOR. So at this time, we'd like to just take a moment and allow them to introduce themselves to you and to tell you just briefly about their story, just to kind of frame the conversation as we get into discussing mergers and acquisitions, just so you have a background about them and the businesses that they ran. So Paul, we'll start with you.
Great. So VeBridge, we started 21 years ago. And we went into business to serve people who embraced enterprise content management. Now, at the time, it was kind of an unusual way to start your business, because usually you started your business picking what you were going to do and defining your business from that standpoint. So in a traditional way, it would have been, we are an imaging service bureau. If we had done that, we'd have lasted about 3 years. But by taking a different approach and saying we're going to serve a community that embraces this, we were open to make changes, open to evolve, open to grow, and not lock ourselves into a very specific niche. We got into business because we like simplifying the complicated. And we took that theme through the way we ran the business. So for example, our mission was 11. So that's on a scale of 1 to 10. And I can see some mathematicians out there saying, well, you know what, that's mathematically impossible. And I agree, because it was a state of mind. And the way it worked was, anytime we embarked on anything, whether it was an internal meeting, an external meeting, a product development, we asked the question, what would a 10 look like to the consumer of what we're about to do? And we would spend some time figuring that out. And then the next question is there anything we can do to make it just a little bit better? And once we got there, we'd say, okay, now, is there anything we can do to make it a little bit better? And what that allowed us to do is, frankly, astonish people, because we would come forward with things that exceeded their expectations if we guessed right on their 10. Every now and again, we guessed wrong, so it didn't work. Our elevator pitch was simple. We would ask, do you know anybody who's so covered up in paper they can't get any business done? And we'd wait for them to self-nominate. Oh my God, that sounds like our company. We fixed that. Simple. Don't get real complicated with the elevator pitch. One of our big differentiators was that we adopted lean process in our service bureau. So we were scanning up to 2 million pages a month. Lean is great in manufacturing, but it's not something typically applied in our industry, and many didn't. And for those of you who aren't familiar with lean, Basically, you're trying for 6 sigma defects. That means about 3.4 errors in every million opportunities. Well, you can only claim that if you're measuring that. And if you're measuring that, you've got a real, finger on the pulse of your business. So not only was it a differentiator, but I'll probably talk about this later, it had a material impact on the valuation of our business. And I also have some, kind of my little 3-minute primer. I'm not going to waste my 3 minutes in my intro for that, but if anybody asks a question about, so what's lean, later on I can do that. Another key, we joined our association, our industry association. It's AIM. It's a 60,000 person association, and we did so with a purpose. And the purpose was to maximize our knowledge, but also to maximize our visibility and be, smarter than everybody else. As a result of our involvement in that association and a desire to be absolutely embedded, eventually I was asked to join the board. I became chairman of the board, and I've now been inducted in their company of fellows. That's their little hall of fame. Last part of the introduction. About 6 or 7 years ago, I was at a Vistage presentation by a guy named Patrick Ungashik. He wrote a book called Dancing in the End Zone. And he went around the table and he said, when are you going to exit? 3 years. When are you going to exit? 5 years. When are you going to exit? 8 years. Everybody had the same answer, pretty much just the number of years changed. He says, all right, here's my advice. Set a date. He says, I'm going to be back here in 2 years, and I'm going to ask you, and you're going to say 3 years, and I'm going to ask you, and you're going to say 5 years. And you're going to set a date. At that time, I set the date of summer 2018 and completed the exit summer 2018.
Mike, do you want to go next?
I will. Hi, I'm Mike Tetterton. My life story started in the hotel business when I was 19 years old. I was running a 20-unit motel on the beach, and at 20 years old, it's not a bad gig. But we figured that all the other hotels, the large ones, had an advantage over us. They had the 800 numbers. And at that time, you couldn't buy an 800 number for a couple of bucks and 5 cents or 2 cents a minute. They cost $1,000 a month, and if you went over about 4 hours, the cost was a couple of $100 an hour. This is before the deregulation. So I started a business right out of the hotel business where I would go out to small hotels and I would sign them up on my service. I would buy the 1-800 number. We would give that number to several of the smaller hotels that couldn't afford the big reservation lines. They would call into our number and we would patch their call through to the hotel. The smaller hotels loved it, went out and sold it at 19, 20 years old, had $30,000 a year committed to me, and back when I was doing this in the late 70s, that was a lot of money. Got advice, got a piece of equipment to do it. We had a storage building that we set our office up in, and we had to take the roof off to get the big computer in. It was so large. Put the computer in and we're ready to go. The phone company gave me the advice on which Watts line to take so I could resell it, and we were in business. 30 days later, my first phone bill came in, and an 18-wheeler pulled up in front of our storage building and pulled off box after box after box of our phone bill, and it took about a half hour to find the front copy of it and opening all the boxes to figure out how much my phone bill was. My phone bill was $32,000. I had $30,000 committed for the year if everybody stayed the year. So we were in business and out of business in about 32 days. That was my first experience. That's what I did with my college money. Went down to the phone company, and the guy kind of chuckled, and I wasn't chuckling because I was 20 years old and looking at, okay, I'm going to have to declare bankruptcy because, divide 12 into 30,000, and that's about how much I had to pay the bills with. That didn't count the payroll I was using. He asked what I owned, And I had just purchased my first suit. I had a car that I got for graduating school that my grandparents, every year in my family, they put $100 in the car account for my birthday and Christmas. So we didn't do a lot of presents, but at 16, I had enough money to buy a car. So the car was paid off, I had a suit, and for some reason, I cannot figure out why, I was good friends with a farmer who was selling some pigs, and I decided I wanted some meat. And so I had gotten a pig, and he had butchered it for me, and I had a freezer full of meat. So that's what I have. I have 3 things to my name. So he kind of chuckled, and it wasn't funny to me at all. And he asked me to give him a couple of days. I came back. And he said, I have worked it out where we gave you the advice to buy this type of rate plan. Had you bought the other one, you'd have still been out of business, but you'd have been in much better shape. We kind of enjoyed watching you do this and get the equipment, and we kind of enjoyed watching what it was do, so we're going to cover your phone bill for you. I did have one other thing I left out. I had $250 in the bank. He said, for the $250 in the bank, we don't want your car, we don't want your suit, and we don't want the pig. For $250, we'll clear your phone bill, and you won't have to declare bankruptcy. So that was my first introduction into business. Point of that story, and the reason I like telling that story, is when you're 20 years old and you don't have a pot to pee and you have no money, you don't know what you're doing, and I certainly did not know what I was doing, but I was out paving my own path. And as discouraged as I got, and I'm now out of business, I have to go find a job, it didn't dwindle that entrepreneur spirit in me. And I worked for other people for a long time after that. And I figured I just, mental notes, that was my college education, figuring out what do you do right and what do you do wrong. Why do so many employees hate working at the job they work? And I wanted to be different. I love your 11 as your mission statement. That is who you want to be. And that's kind of what we did and continued to do that. Ended up through the hotel business, back in the hotel business, and opened my first hotel in 1998. And the hotel, it had to go right. I went to friends and family, everybody I knew that had money, to try to borrow money. I need $350,000 to start the hotel because, again, I didn't have any money. But I had an idea, and I had the passion, I had a drive. So what do? I went to everybody I knew that could invest $350,000. The problem is your friends and family don't want to tell you no. So I had left my job. This was my passion, and I was going to do it. 3, 4, 5, 6 months went along, and I just couldn't get anybody to commit either way. They wouldn't even say no because they didn't want to hurt my feelings. We got an opportunity to go to an investor through a friend of mine who didn't know me. Went up, he was an 80-year-old gentleman. He had 14 guys like me that he was helping and in business with. 20-minute meeting, and he wrote me a check for $350,000. We ended up cutting a deal where I owned 51% of the voting stock, and he put up 100% of the capital. Cool deal. And we went out and built 12 hotels. Ended up buying or acquiring. We did acquire a few. So that was my first big business. Sold it about 8 years ago. First time I'd ever made any real money. And then started Creative Lodging in Lexington while I had that business going, and actually the hotel business funded the startup of it. And I'll be brief, but my 85 at that point year old partner, I went to see him. We took him his P&L every month, and I went to see him and told him that I was starting this business. And I have now determined, he's now passed away, but I've now determined he wasn't as emotional as he was a master manipulator. In a good sense, I mean. I love this man dearly. But these tears welled up in his eyes, and he looked at me and he said, Mike, I thought we were partners, and if you're starting this business, I'm 85 years old, I don't have the energy to go do this. I'm depending on you to go do it. And so I said, well, okay, I don't need any money right now because it's lodging, and I've kind of funded it right now. He said, well, you will. You'll grow. You'll need it. No bank's going to finance you on this type of project because you don't have any assets in the business. He He said, how about I give you a $100,000 line of credit? I said, cool. He said, how much percent should I get for that? I don't know, how much do you want? You tell me. I'll go with what you 10%. Well, if that's what you think's fair. Took his line of credit. We now had some cash, and we decided, let's grow this thing, Creative Lodging. And I'll give you the end of the story right now. We started, first year we did $80,000 in income. 15 years later, the year we sold, we did about $178 million in income. We went from 4 people on a card table to 300 people in the Kroger building at Beaumont Center. So had $100,000, let's go hire some people and grow this thing the way it ought to. We burned through that pretty quick. Company was starting to grow. We weren't close to making a profit. Went back to him, said, you know, this thing seems to be taking off. We think we found a little niche here. And what we were doing is we were making reservations, housing, hotel reservations for companies that had a lot of people out in the field. And this thing was starting to work. We were kind of brokering them. We'd buy the room for $60. We'd sell it for $70. The lowest rate they could get on the internet would have been about $80, $85. So we were saving them money. It worked for everybody. So borrowed another $100,000 on the line of credit. He said, well, now, how much do you think I should get for that? And his CPA was sitting beside him and said, you know, his name was Earl. Said, Earl, you need to buy into the company if you want to. That's how you need to get, I'm going to make a loan to the company, and I need some shares back. So well, I don't know, another 10%. Well, you know, if you think that's fair. Took my $100,000. He now had 20. I was determined I was not going back but one more time because I was going to lose all my company. We started growing. Revenue started coming in. We decided let's move this thing out one more time. Let's get another $100,000. Went back. What do you think? Same story. What do you think we should? Earl, you really need to buy into the company. The CPA is very fair about this. No, he can't go borrow money anywhere on a business startup like this. So I'm going to loan him the money, and then we'll get the shares. So how about 35%? He said, well, that's where I thought we should have been to start with. So we all set it up 35%, and then we grew it into a $178 million company from a revenue standpoint. Life was great, about a 45% compound annual growth. We didn't look for an exit. Somebody approached us, our biggest competitor, under the guise of just wanting to get to know us, and they ended up wanting the company more than I wanted the company, and that's kind of how we sold. So that's a little bit of the story about what we've been doing.
Thank you, Mike. Eldon?
Yeah, I'm not your startup guy, as these guys have the experience. I'm more of your corporate product of a company called Galls that started here in Lexington about 52 years ago. When I started in the late 80s, young, wet behind the ears, about 21 years old. But I was very fortunate. My mentor, Alan Bloomfield, taught me the true art of the financial aspects of running a business, how to make a profit, and making true judgment calls based on what you know. But I have spent 32 years in the public safety government sector. Galls is a distribution model-based business. I've spent many years on the manufacturing side as well with our private label, and I've been an executive for the company for a very, very long time. I'm also on the board of directors of the National Association of Police Equipment Distributors, as well as the board of directors of the National Association of Uniform Manufacturers and Distributors. Been on those boards about 15 years. Galls really, in my career, started in the late 80s. It was about a $5 million local business that was family owned. It was had all the characteristics of a small business that was trying to grow and leverage every aspect that they could, from CPA firms, law firms, banks, as well as advisors that the owner had tapped into and brought into the business. I think I was number 20 employee at the time. So really, you know, what is Galls today in 2019? Galls is the premier leader of distribution in the public safety sector. We sell to police, fire, EMS, security, postal, transit, all the federal agencies, as well as U.S. military. We are today a 500 million plus company that really has grown in the early years through organic growth of innovative direct marketing, and the most recent 10 years really through acquisitions. We're a full multi-sales channel. We've got 10 catalog brands, 12 different website titles. We've got 85 branches around the country. We have 150 sales reps out there beating the street and growing the business for us. So a lot of employees and a lot of activity. Our business model is typical distribution with an additive solution for the market. So, we've got $85 million of inventory. We do quick ship delivery to the customers, a wide range of products that they can order. So we really are that one-stop shop. But what we add to the mix to avoid the Amazon effect, who can really go out and impact your business, is we add the uniform program management piece of it, right? So we measure the officers, we tailor their uniforms, we embellish the uniforms. We do all that with an IT solution that wraps it around it, and now we can defend our marketplace and our leadership position away from groups like Amazon. And it's a huge barrier to entry for other investment firms or other strategics that want to come into this industry that we're in today. We've got about 8,000 public safety agencies using our technology and that are our customers today, that we really leverage off of that. So really I have evolved and gained knowledge through the growth of the business from 5 million to 500 million in all the changes of leadership and strategies and ownership. But my most recent knowledge gain really evolved around mergers and acquisitions. So as an industry leader and widely known in the industry, I really have been able to go out and do a lot of buy transactions. I've acquired in the last 7 years over 350 million of revenue of businesses out there, mostly small and medium-sized companies that were all 100% privately owned by individuals or families. So really over those years, I've acquired businesses in 31 states, 90 locations, 6 distribution centers, and in 7 market segments that we participate in. I've done asset deal structures, stock deal structures, as well as inventory buyouts. We'll go into a little bit more of that in the next section. But what I want to mention to everybody here is, in looking at over 300 businesses in the last 7 years with a 10% conversion rate, I've looked at a lot of businesses and talked to a lot of sellers that really didn't plan on exiting the business. They didn't develop strategies on how to exit. They didn't seek advice. So I have seen the good and the bad and the ugly, and can quickly identify the strengths of a business, quickly identify the weaknesses of a business, and hopefully today I can help by sharing some of that knowledge with you.
All right, thank you. So just as a quick heads up for the audience, we are going to open the floor to your questions in a few moments. So be thinking as we're going through the next few minutes of questions that you may have for our panelists, and we'll have that time at the end. We want to get started with the M&A specific part of the discussion on this question. So, and Paul, we'll start with you. So if you would describe the M&A experience, when did you start looking toward the M&A and planning for the M&A? When did you first get introduced to Konica, and how did that process go?
Okay, so the planning started a little over 5 years prior to exit, and that's prescribed in the book that I recommended and several other books. And I think if we're going to go in order, then later on I'll kind of click through some of the things that were really important for us to invest our time in order to maximize our valuation. I got contacted by Konica Minolta about a year and a half before the real acquisition process started. I mentioned AIM and I mentioned Lean. So a senior member of the AIM Association recommended to Konica Minolta that they had to take a look at this little company in Lexington, Kentucky, because we were doing twice the productivity of any other company that they'd experienced in our space. And it was, you know, really impressive quality model. So we heard from Konica Minolta, and the issue that I was having is, here's a little open the kimono piece. We had 3 points in the 20 years where I honestly thought I was going to lose the business. Pipeline wasn't rich, and the cash was almost gone. And when that happens, the financials look like crap. So when you're involved in an acquisition and they're looking back 3 years, if one of those dips happened, you know, 3 years ago, you want that year to fall off, and you want your strong trend to continue. And I was real open with them about that, and they said, yeah, that's probably the best thing to do. So it took about a year and a half for us to get to a letter of intent. From that point, it was a 90-day process. Process was absolutely grueling. I had to produce thousands of documents, literally hundreds of different slices and dices of our financial and customer data and process data. Some of these we didn't have canned reports, so it was really a lot of, you know, pivot tables and things like that. My finance guy was not yet in the process, so, you know, this guy who spends all his time, you know, selling and worried about process is now punching around in Excel spreadsheets. It was also an incredibly lonely time. For the first time in my career, I did not have full disclosure with my vendors, customers, or employees. And that really pained me because I was going around, I felt like I was going around doing things behind everybody's back. So it was a very, very lonely process. I got one great validation though. This was a moral validation. So one of the things we always talked about in our company is make sure no matter what the cost, your moral compass is always properly calibrated. Make the right decision even though you know you're going to lose financially or there's going to be some other pain involved. So here's how I got my validation. So I'm producing all this stuff thinking they just need this data, they just need this data, they want to see it this way, they just want to see it this way. I got a call about 45 days into the process from the guy leading the acquisition. He says, Paul, this is a pretty unique situation. He said, the data you give us, we you know, cross-reference it, we check it 5 different ways, we got software, and what we're looking for is anomalies. Because nobody just tells the whole truth in an acquisition. And they never realize that when we ask for the data this way, they're going to forget the lie they told us when we asked for it this way. He says, we have found 0 anomalies. And the reason I share that is not to brag about our morality, but it's to let you know if you're involved in an acquisition, it's either fact or I don't know. The temptation is to embellish and to make it better. But you know, that was really key. Good?
Okay, Mike, same question to you, and you mentioned that your customer approached you, so a little bit different story, but tell us your story with CLS.
They did approach me. We approached them first. They were they were General Motors, and we were the small car company. We were the $170 million company, and they were doing $850 million at the time. They were buying rooms where I told you example before, I'd buy it for 50, I'd sell it for 60. They couldn't buy it less than about 75 or 80. When I'm buying it for 50, my large competitor was buying it for $42, $43. They had a lot more buying power than I did. The number of hotel rooms we bought in a month was about what they were buying what we bought in a year, they were buying in a month. So I actually approached them to see if I could buy rooms from them at a discounted rate where they could pick up $1 or $2 per room. have another source of income so that if we ever got ready to sell, we were already aligned. They picked up on that and then started approaching us about partnering under the guise that they would partner with us while the entire time they were educating us about their company and all the acquisitions. The company that purchased us is called FLEETCOR. They're in the fleet gas card business, the toll business, the credit card business, and 900 other things. They had purchased about $1 billion worth of companies in the prior 12 months to buying us. It's the first introduction we got to guys like you, the M&A guys. To say it was grueling, I know what you're talking about. To say it was lonely and you felt like you were deceiving your employees, your vendors, your bankers, and everybody else, because it has to be done in this cone of kind of quietness and silence. With 300 employees in the building, you didn't want it to get out, because while I knew the future of most of the people were solid, you still have to have employees to run the business. Employees tend to panic with that. So we went through all of those emotions. It was a public company that bought us, and it was our first introduction to the M&A world. We were not set up for this. The thousands and thousands of documents that they wanted, and it's absolutely right. They want to look at it 9 different ways so they can find out where the issues are. That's what these guys are experts at. If they're going to spend $100 million or something around there on a company, they want to know what they're getting. So the process took for us, the first time we ever met was in April of 17. They came to visit us and offered us a 50% type offer. They'd spent 8 hours in our building, in our facility, and after their offer, they were gone in probably 6 minutes because we ended the meeting. One of the things about selling is it's just like buying or selling anything. You get emotionally tied into, okay, this deal's going to go, but the best advice I can give people is you got to be able to walk away. We were not looking to sell, and I could have walked away at any point in it, and it was okay with me. We had a business we liked. The M&A guys, if I'm an M&A guy, I want you totally invested in thinking about what your next move is and getting all the due diligence done, because emotionally you're already at the next step. That way if something comes up and the price has to be adjusted or anything, any of the details in the deal, you tend to kind of will go easy on them. The process was, April we met, we had a letter of intent, single-page letter of intent in June, the end of June. Kind of an interesting thing. We were so far away on price that we couldn't talk to each other. Nobody talked for about 2.5, 3 weeks. Finally, the CEO of this multi-billion-dollar company called and said, listen, this is a small deal for us. It's a fairly big deal for you, but we really like your business. We like what you've accomplished. We like your reputation. And quite frankly, you keep getting in our pants in sales. We're tired of losing sales to you, so we'd like to sit down and talk with you. Would you come back up and see us? But I want you to come alone. And I'm going to be alone. We'll keep all the other guys out of the room. And when I sat down, this is, again, these guys running a multi-billion-dollar company. He said, here's the process I'd like to take place. And I'm telling you this because it is a great process. I wish I had done it with him. He said, typically, when I'm trying to buy a company, the person I'm talking to is already on the next step of how to respond to me, and they don't listen. And that's a lot of conversations. And then when you're talking to me, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to maneuver next, and I'm not really listening to you. What I'd like to do is let's start with kind of communication 101. I'm going to tell you why I think your company is worth the amount we offered. When I finish, I want you to repeat back what you heard me say. Once you fully understand it, then I'd like you to tell me why you think it's worth this much higher. And I'm going to be quiet and listen to you, and I will repeat back what you said. And that's about as basic. We've all heard that before, but the fact that this guy who He has bad press because his company compensation committee pays him so much money, but he does it because he is consistently returning stockholders. They're in Atlanta, Georgia. You probably never heard of them, but the guy's making $300 to $600 million a year. He's making more than the guy who's in charge of MasterCard and the guy who's in charge of American Express and companies like that, and he's in Atlanta, Georgia, and we've never heard of him. So he talked, I repeated back why he thought my company, and then he did what he said. He got very quiet and he listened to me. And after he listened to me, we had pinned the deal in probably 12 minutes. He thought that I was trying to get his multiple down, and it wasn't his multiple at all. He had some errors in his calculation of what our profits were. He wasn't counting a lot of the expenses we ran through, which is one advice I'm going to give you. Be very careful. It's addicting when you have your own business and you don't have a venture capital. You want to run every expense you have through it because it's deductible, and that's a way we can shave a little off of our tax burden. And it's great if you keep great records. Really shouldn't do it. In our new business, we've committed, we're not running a personal expense through it. We'll just take the tax hit. It's so much cleaner when you get ready to be acquired because you have all these add backs that you have to deal with and you have to verify that they're good. Once he understood it and he bought into it, we pinned the deal and we were done. We closed in October. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever been through. And we didn't plan for it. This is the last thing I'm going to say. I had always been the guy, I was a liar to myself. I'm building this business. We were making probably $5.5 million a year on the bottom line. And I'm pretty transparent, so I don't mind telling numbers. But at $5.5 million on the bottom line every year in a business that actually thrives better in recession because companies are trying to save money and they want to save on housing their people, why would you ever sell the business? And so that's kind of the mentality I had taken through every business I'd ever bought. As these guys walked through our business, it got back to me that one of our employees said, he's going to sell the business. And it ticked me off because we'd given no indication out whatsoever. And how would you say that? Why would you come? And they said he had checked my research, and that was my MO. I built a business up, and I would sell. And I said, no, that's not me. And I took a minute and thought about it and said, no, that's exactly me. I don't intend to do that. I don't start them to do it. So when we started, we got the public accounting firm involved, and we had audited books for that end date that would ever come, knowing that I didn't really want it to come. But when the offer got on the table, it came. We would have done it much differently had I planned. These guys would love to get you when you're not planning to sell, and they can get you emotionally involved, because I could have taken my probably fat, dumb, and happy. We're just living a great life. But I probably could have taken my $5.5 million EBITDA profit, probably up $1.5 million, $1.75 million for a 2-year period, and still run the business okay, had I not been planning and investing in the next 4 years. And I was planning to keep the business, and some of that I would have pulled back, and I would have gotten my 17 multiple on it.
So Eldon, as you answer this question, so we've heard the grueling process.
Right.
Help us understand from your perspective, from the acquirer side, what you're looking for and what these processes are like, and what is it that you're looking at that helps you to make a decision, yeah.
Yeah, so I've done 30 acquisition transactions in 7 years. That's a pretty fast pace. Also have heavily participated in the sales side of Galls twice, 2011 and 2018, going through the grueling auction process with investors and private equity. So I've been on both sides of the fence. But really, when it comes to preparing your business to sell, the first thing I would say is profit, 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 okay? Most businesses are going to be valued based on the profit of the business, and we'll go into some of that in greater detail in a little bit. The other thing I would mention is make sure, in addition to yourself, you're developing a strong support or management team that's there with you, because there's value in that from a buyer standpoint. He touched on it. I express it very heavily. Good, clean financial record keeping. Spend time with your CPA, understand what you're doing, let them advise you, even hire them and let them do your financial statements and your balance sheets. Let them help you with tax planning. The number one disruptor in a deal not happening is dirty financials where you cannot truly justify the profit you're reporting in your data. Okay? That is a big deal and the number one reason why deals do not happen. From a process standpoint, I do the market research, I do the target prospect sourcing, I do the prospect relationship management that takes 3, 4, 5 years in working with people like these guys. I also do all the negotiations, deal with the agreements, and then I handle oversight of all the due diligence. And that's what they're referring to, you know, the 1,000 documents that you have to supply. So in that part of the process, due diligence really can take 45 days if you're great, or it can take 6 months. The time really is driven based on your effort. We know you're trying to operate a business every single day and you're working 60 hours a week, but due diligence is never going to happen without your time and effort. So the more time and effort that you put into it during the process, the quicker you're going to get to the sell date. Some people invest and spend the money and use outside services to help them along. If you have the money and can do it and you're just distracted in operating the business, I fully recommend it. It can really expedite the process and help you along the way, both from a law firm advisors as well as a CPA firm advisors. Both can be the best partners in your process when you're trying to sell a business. And you're going to want to engage with them, you know, 5 years in advance. As they said earlier, if you pick your date 5 years before, you need to know everything at that point from your law firm, your CPA firm, from your advisors, so that you are making the right decisions in the business. And I think that's a topic we're going to cover in a little bit, right?
So as I said, we're going to open the floor for questions, so be thinking about that. We've got time, I guess, for one more question for the panel, and before we go to the audience Q&A. So with this one, kind of look through your thoughts and think through if there's anything that you for sure want to say, please kind of wrap it into this one. So at a high level, the question is, how do you prepare for the exit? So what are the things that need to happen years in advance to set you on a path to be successful as you move through this process? We've heard a lot about documents and service providers and other things like that. So just kind of hit on all those things. And I'll just open this one up to the panel, so anybody that wants to chime in, please go ahead.
I'll go. I'm going to do these more bulleted and rather than embellish. And if anybody's got any questions on them, you can hit it in the Q&A. Number one, pick a date. Number two, pick an exit model. You don't think about it. Any, outie, fall off a cliff. Any, you sell to your employees. Outie, you sell to somebody else. Run off a cliff. You just run it until you're tired of it and walk away. Pick one and pick it early. Confirm that all your documentation is in order. And this goes along with running a business where every deal has a contract, every change in that contract has a change control. You know, all those things, they've got to be in order. Every process has to be documented. It's got to be in a binder and people have to be following it. Work on your management team and then stop coming to the office. So I changed my schedule to 2 days a week in the office because I needed to see what was going to happen. Am I going to get a phone call every day from the management team? I needed to know they were strong. One of my biggest mistakes was I did hire an M&A team that worked historically in my business. It was a big mistake because the guy I hired, now had his son in the business, and he completely backed out. The son was not up to standard, so I ended up running it myself and paying them money. I want to touch on the add backs. I don't agree 100%. I do believe that the moral compass calibration is important. If something makes sense to include in your P&L for tax purposes that a buying company would probably not support, then keep track of it, because it is an add back. So your company's going to lease your car. The buyer might not. You might employ family members. Company might feel like that's not okay, and they're not going to be able to be there. But you don't charge your laundry to the company. That's not an add back. You know, country club memberships, that's sort of a shaky thing. The point is, add backs are not wrong if they're not wrong, but there is gray area. Let's see here. Accrual accounting. So if you're picking your accounting method, make it accrual. Make sure at a minimum you have one of our, sponsor accounting firms doing your annual taxes at a minimum. Audited is great. We never went the audited rate route. I'm an MBA in finance, and I did that part of it, but I had my company here in town who made sure that I was keeping it honest. And I ran it like a publicly traded company because I ran publicly traded companies. A few things to your point, EBITDA is important. Make sure that you are focused on the EBITDA and not just spending luxury money that you can't claw back. Recurring revenue is really, really important. Percentage of customer concentration. You got one customer that's doing $5 million, everybody else accounts for $80,000 a year, you are not going to sell your company. Your customer longevity. I was surprised to find out that our average customer longevity was 9.5 years. That's a pretty good number in today's market in high tech. Gross margin is important depending on what kind of business you're running, particularly if it beats industry. Another thing is focus on the product line. There's a couple of models there. When you're acquired, some companies want you to have exactly the product line they have. And if it's a perfect fit, it can be a perfect fit. More often, 3 of the things you do they want, 2 of them you don't, and you're going to be faced with jettisoning that or having that not valued as highly as you would have valued it. The other side of that coin is they're running a great business, but they're missing this service, and that's what you do. So those are areas where you're going to get a higher valuation. Either all your services line up, or you got something they don't have, and that's why they're buying you. Let's see here. That should cover it.
Just a couple other points. Both these guys beside me mentioned building a team. I can't emphasize it enough. When somebody's buying you, they're buying your profit, but they're buying the ability to take that profit year after year after year and grow it. They're not buying it to hold it still. They're looking at efficiencies in the business. Hire a great, talented team. Hire more talent than you need. Please, for God's sakes, the biggest problem I ever see in business is people will not hire people better than themselves. Hire people smarter than you. If you've got that kind of pride, go work for somebody else instead of entrepreneurs. You give us a bad name. Go hire smart people, seriously. I'm closing tomorrow on a deal that I've had people in Florida for the last 2 weeks creating employee files with I-9s and signing a W-4 and getting an emergency contact and a copy of the driver's license and security, because I got 200 employees I'm getting ready to take over, and there's not one single employee file and there's not one I-9. And you can't operate that way. That's why they're selling. Build a great team. We put a CFO on, and she did all of our business. We did go the outside accounting, or not outside accounting, we went the outside audit route. That's up to you. Your documents, the one last thing I'm going to say is things you don't think about. First thing these guys are going to ask you, then your not first thing, but several items down is going to be, we want to see every contract you have. So when I sold the first company, I had 12 hotels, and I didn't have a copy of a dumpster contract or the cable TV contract, the simple little thing. Who keeps a dumpster contract? The guy buying it wants to see the dumpster contract. Take your contracts and organize yourself and put them in a file. You never know when somebody's going to come up and want to talk about an offer you'd like to entertain. So be prepared always.
We do that. We fix that.
Yeah, with your documents, that's it. And that's it, thanks.
As a buyer, I'm going to focus on the key essentials, or really the brass tacks of what's important to you. The key financial drivers of your business, when I look at a financial profile of someone we want to acquire, the sales and margin historic growth pattern, you need to show multi-year trends of growth in the previous years historically. That allows us to project out that the future has growth trends in the projections. That's very essential. 5 years out, you need to make sure you and your team are putting in strategies, goals, and investments in your business to meet the financial key metrics of the business of where you want to be in 5 years when you want to sell. Don't do it 1 year before, because if you spend $200,000 on an IT system, you're not going to get reimbursed for that in any shape, form, or fashion. So let's go through some key metrics. You may want to write these down. We go straight to the financials. Year over year, double-digit sales and margin growth are essential. You're going to want your gross margin to be 40% or higher. That could change based on the industry that you're in. You want to control your SG&A to be 20% or less. That's a number we drive straight to when we review a business. You heard us talk about EBITDA. Learn everything you can about the drivers and levers that impact your EBITDA in your business, but your EBITDA is a number we focus on, and EBITDA needs to be 10% or higher. Again, that can change based on the industry that you're in. But if we look at a business profile and you're not growing in sales and margin, we're going to turn away. If we look at it and your gross margin is 20%, we're going to turn it away. We're not going to buy it. If you're spending, as he said earlier, and your SG&A is at 40%, we're not going to buy the business more than likely. And definitely when we get to the EBITDA line of your financial statement and you're at way below 10%, we're not going to buy the business, right? Now, there are a whole other topic of performance synergies that we would look at as a strategic buyer, but that's a whole other topic that could take another hour. But I guess really what I'm talking about is if you want to maximize the selling price of your business, frame up a business that can meet those metrics I just read to you, and you're going to get a very nice multiple for your business from potentially a strategic buyer or an investor buyer. I've dealt with strategic buyers at Galls, and we're private equity owned today. So I've seen every different perspective in how they view the business. But if you follow those key metrics, you should do just fine.
All right, the floor is yours. Who has questions? Ryan has the microphone. He'll be bringing the microphone to you if you have a question. Who wants to get us started? Yep, Tim's got a question. Ryan will bring you the microphone. So this is Tim Fogarty with Pyrochem Catalyst.
Yeah, I was interested, only one of you had engaged an investment banker and that didn't work out very well. On the selling side, is there a rationale for getting an investment banker involved in order to run a process? And on the buying side, what's your reaction to being a buyer and having an investment banker as the person that's engaging with you as opposed to the company?
The reason that I engaged an M&A team is because this was my first rodeo. do you really want to trust yourself to do something completely new when it's the rest of your life? So I felt like they would be able to help me navigate. They would be able to help me, push the valuation, deal with the negotiation, and not let me fall into any traps. And I bet if I used a different one, they could have done all those things.
We didn't use an investment banker. I probably should have. I think I would have gotten more money. I did use someone from the investment banker business who had done some consulting for us. So we did have some professional guidance, but probably not to the degree that we could have.
Yeah, so I've experienced it on both sides. On the sell side, twice we used investment bankers. And then on the buy side, it's happened 3 times. Absolutely, they bring value. There's 3 things that they do for you. One, they're going to go out and tell your story to a lot of people that you've never met that may be interested in investing in your business or buying your business. So they're exposing you in your business, okay? The second thing, if you don't have any knowledge or experience in selling a business, they're going to help you tremendously in understanding all the aspects of the sale. The third and most important thing, they get paid on commission. They're going to try to get you the highest possible selling price that they can so they can make some money as well. So they are very beneficial. You just need to pick the one that is the best fit for you and what you want to go out and achieve. And hopefully they have some experience in your industry. That is an added plus.
Another question?
Hi, my name is Destin George Bell. I think I'm the youngest guy in here, so I might ask you a question that's stupid. But one thing I was interested in, because I'm looking to get into tech and software, and a lot of software companies, when you look down at the bottom of their financial statements, a lot of red down there. So what would you say that you look for in that industry in terms of buying? Does that change the multiplier? What kind of financial ratios and whatnot do you look at for acquiring in that industry?
Paul really should take that.
Well, not having done software acquisitions, I'm not sure that I can give you good advice on that. One thing that I will say is, for companies that aren't necessarily in the software space, but do a lot of intellectual property, either for internal process or to sell to customers, catalog it. That made a big difference in our valuation. We had over 1,000 titles that we had cataloged, including simple Excel macros that did, unusual things. The software space is pretty crazy. When you're, in the startup world, it's about, who thinks it's less expensive and faster to market to buy you than to try to build it themselves. And because I don't have any experience there, although I would have loved to, I don't have good advice there.
Yeah, from a buy side, I've never done an IP or technology acquisition, but the value, in most cases, they're going to put on the marketability of the product and what the future runway of sales and profit could be with your technology or software that you have. But I don't have any experience on that.
There have been some Shark Tank episodes you might want to watch, though.
All right, last question, Keith.
Whoa, last question. That's a lot of pressure. My name is Keith. I work with Awesome Inc. I'm a little bit curious, Mike, if you could shed a little bit more of the story on after that 12-minute agreement. I thought that was really powerful, the way that you discussed that is taking turns repeating back what you think you heard. What was it like telling the employees at CLS of the deal? I'm curious to know a little bit more on that side. How did the employees take it? Were there any strained relationships? What's it like on the other side?
That was probably the most difficult thing we did. It was an emotional day. My deal with the sale was I was staying 12 months and then I was leaving. I don't work well with other people. I like to be able to spend the money and invest in the future the way I see it. So we set it up a year transition and then I would be gone. Most people understood, and by the time You know, when we started the company, we'd have our monthly meeting around a table like this. We'd have a lunch every day, and then it got to be 2 and 3 tables. But it was still pretty intimate for a long time. The last 2 or 3 years, and we got up to 275, 300 people, and I just didn't know them. The sad part about growing a company like that is I went up to introduce myself to someone one time, and they were the caterer. They weren't an employee. Went up another time, and somebody came up to introduce themselves to me, and I didn't recognize them or know their name, and did you just start? No, I've been here for 6.5 months. And that's a little embarrassing when you're in the same building. But the telling them, that went okay. The problem is I'm now in an office. I had some empty space beside where CLS is, and I've just built my new office. And so when we walk down to get some food, we go past the building every day and we see these employees. And what the company did, we were 8 out of 9 times, I think, best places to work in Kentucky, or 7 out of 8 years best places to work in Kentucky. You know, we did employee loans. We took $10,000 a month and had a charitable giving committee, and we went out and we tried to impact someone's life. We had a Christmas club. We'd give you a week off if you would go serve someone, because we thought service was a noble thing in our business to do. So we'd match your vacation with a week. All of that kind of fluff went away because I was having fun doing what I was doing. The company that bought us is looking for margin. They're looking for investors to get a return on their money, much more focused than I was. So all that went away. So the animosity or the feelings they have about what the company turned into has grown over the last year a lot. We sometimes go the other way for lunch now.
So that's a great question, and if you're running your business with a purpose, you can anticipate the event. One of the things that we did, we had quarterly off-site meetings for 2 hours where we presented we embraced traction, EOS. There's a book out there, read it, it's really good. We'd embrace that, and quarterly we brought the whole staff, everybody on the team. We presented, how we'd done against our rocks and what our upcoming measures were and all those types of things. Another theme that we had in our business was cherry picking. We let everybody know that if they worked for us, they had been cherry picked, to the point of if they accomplished something special, we'd give them a cherry pie. So when we called the all hands on deck at an off-site facility for a 2-hour EOS meeting, there was no concern about, oh my God, why are they calling us together? They never do this before. The theme of the presentation, we had the Konica Minolta executive team there in the wings. The theme was, we all get cherry picking. Well, we've been cherry picked. And we talked about why that was great. And as soon as I said, and I'm all in, this is the most exciting career change I've ever made, and I'm here. And we're all here. When the Konica Minolta executive team came in, they got a standing ovation from 50 people. And they said that's the first time that's ever happened for them. So thinking about that a couple years in advance as well. How are you going to be able to set this up? What's this going to look like? 11. Just thinking that way.
I might add one more thing. In our business, the company that bought us was our competitor. So in our building, their logo was on our wall with an arrow on it. So they were not the good guys, and I was a traitor, had sold to the bad guys. So we had to convince them that while it was great in business for 15 years to go after them, the reason they were so large is they had some pretty good qualities.
So Paul, Mike, Eldon, we thank you guys very much for sharing your time with us today. We do have a parting gift for you here, the notebook from Commerce Lexington. This is our Located in Lexington book, so it's a gift from Commerce Lexington. So, all right, thank you. So at this time, we do have a networking break, and lunch is served outside. So take about 30 minutes.